Today we're making a structural model out of card, which I'm hoping will mimic steel. As we zoom in, what we can see is that there's two planes that are intersecting one another, and this is the key part that I want to work on today. So before starting the model, I made a quick sketch, which we can see here. Highlighted in blue is 4 key elements. A horizontal band, which is this thick, chunky piece of steel, and then you've got a H column, which comes from the ground up, and they kind of link to one another. What I really wanted to focus on is how we intersect them. Before making the model, I basically made a CAD model of the model, which allowed me to understand how we're going to make this webbed steel and to kind of think about how we get these tolerances right. So now we know how I'm going to build it. Let's give it a start. Before we kind of made the big model, I made a few testers just to understand if, first of all, this idea is going to work, and secondly, how difficult is it to cut, because it is quite a picky looking model. So here's just a quick little run through how I did it. I just printed it out, I made a quick little CAD template and then cut it out, stuck it together. We've got a little time lapse for you to look at now, before we then look at how we do the big chunky one. A few kind of key things popped up when I made them. I made 2 just to kind of test how they looked and how it operated. And from the 2, I kind of learned some key things, mainly that you've got to be really careful with the interface between the horizontal band and the vertical band, and that you've got to have a little bit of tolerance for things just to be stuck together, because nothing really is ever stuck in the exact same place you want it to go, because things are a little bit thicker or things are a little bit cut wonkily. So I really wanted to iron out all of these kind of quirks before I made the big model. And here we go to the gluing part. I've used some just random wood glue that I found in the shed. It all does the same thing, doesn't it? As long as it dries clear. I built the model kind of from the ground up, so we've got this base which has all these H cutouts in them. So when we put our columns in, it's quite easy to line everything up above. So once we've lined up all the columns, we can then move on to the I-beam, this ring beam that goes all the way around the model. That was, again, quite easy to do, because even though we had a lot of cutting to do, everything should, and I hope it does line up so that the vertical and the horizontals kind of tie in together and everything looks quite square. Because of that also, the model becomes quite rigid. Here are the 2 tester models that I ended up making just to check everything fits. Some quirks that we can have a look at now are the kind of key parts that we're looking at. So this is the first one. We're going to just zoom in. This one, I think I got the proportions wrong for this steel. I don't know how I managed to do it, but something went a bit wonky with the CAD. So it's obviously the height of that vertical I-beam is just wrong, and the junction between the column and the beam is just not right. So it's just getting those tolerances aligned with what we need. With the second one, it's a bit nicer, the proportions are right, but it's just that band, the H column, it needs to be trimmed down a bit further. So those are the things that I kind of looked at with the next model. So now we've made these 2, let's just kind of run back to our sketch to review what we wanted with the model. So we're not far off. I think it's just a matter of getting those tolerances right and cutting a lot more cardboard for the bigger model. Okay, let's get cracking. So here again, I've made a template on the computer. relating to all the things we spoke about after the first two testers, and then just started cutting. It's quite easy to do it this way because you've just got a guide and you can just kind of switch off a bit and just cut, and cut in between the lines. There's a lot more of these L shapes here to cut, but yeah, it's all relatively straightforward. Cutting all the pieces, making the cutout for the base, and then just sticking it all together. And now we're just sticking everything together. Again, it's been quite easy once you do the initial thinking about the interaction between the base, the columns, and the lower part of the steel, which then can kind of slots in place and everything lines up, which is great. So here is now the assembled model that we've got. I think it's come out quite nice. There's a few quirks on it still with like the top of the steel, something's bowing with the shadow, but apart from that I think it's come out quite nice. Be a nice bit of decoration to the room. Great, on to the next one.